Roll call, Michelle.
Jeremy Mahorg,
Here.
Travis Dunlap, Nick Loving,
Here.
Nicole Miglorny,
Here.
Sarah Audman,
Here.
Bernie Poprod, and Roseanne Bozak are absent.
Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. Me and Michelle have already been communicating, and the reason why you don't have a draft of them is because they weren't able to be completed. Discussion was, let's say, not linear at the last meeting, and it's gonna take a little while to sort through it. So I'd expect that for the next meeting. The next thing is communication bills and expenditures. Michelle, anything?
Yeah, ordinance 310-2022 and ordinance 311-2022 were adopted at the February 9th town council meeting.
Was there any communication that you know of back with that? I know there was a little bit of confusion between the order of adoption.
No, so I got both of those sent to me, and Corinne also sent them when she updated them
Okay,
on the town code.
And I spoke with Corinne about that as well, and I think there was some discrepancy between, some conflict between the two, so I think that's something that we need to revisit, just fix those mistakes.
okay.
I think it may have been the version of the ordinance that was adopted.
Okay,
I would have covered all at the same time. I looked back into that. I believe what happened is on one version, some things were struck, on the next version, they were unstruck for some reason. So we, as Attorney Patton said, we'll have to go back and see. I don't know what Corinne was updating today. And if she was going to change it, I thought I'd wait and see what was on the official online version. And we can go back and fix that. But if I understood what Corinne told me correctly, was that our current, the intention of having the 7 foot and not the 5 foot would be recorded as the official amount, which is what it is. But I think we'll have to go back and get rid of some overlap.
so your recommendation would something to put on the agenda for next month to revisit this?
That's what I think. needs to
Yeah.
be
Okay.
done.
Yeah, because we'll have to have what's there and what was supposed to be there, and then set it for public hearing, is that correct?
Report of officers, committee and staff. Jack.
The letters went out for the containers for the commercial, and I've gotten response to 5 of them so far. And so expect by the next BZA meeting or the plan commission meeting that we'll be discussing more about storage containers.
Okay.
I mean, that's really it.
Okay. Tim.
Nothing to report.
Those of you who aren't aware, Attorney Patton is now with us. Do you have anything for us?
No.
Travis?
No, sir.
Sarah?
Nothing beyond, or
No,
And- Okay, the next thing on the agenda is a public hearing for Matt Emery. Michelle, is all the paperwork in order?
Yes,
Mr. Emery?
Yep.
So I'm gonna get through a few things and then you're gonna have to address the board in regards to this, but. So the ground rules during public comment for anybody that would like to speak either in favor or opposition. During public comment, you must come, you know, to the podium, but I'm gonna have you stand up. You're gonna have to state your name and address for the record. And then you're gonna address the board with any of your questions or concerns. And then that will be that. So Mr. Emery, I am gonna open the public hearing in reference to the relocation of the sewer easement on your property. So at this point, if you can, what I'm looking for, I know that we had a preliminary discussion, but not everybody here was obviously privy to that. And based on the fact that I didn't have any chance to review our minutes either, I'd like to kind of describe what you're looking to have done.
Basically the current sanitary sewer easement that cuts through my yard, there's no sewer in the ground. I'm trying to have it relocated to run along the road. The beginning and end are exactly the same of the easement. So that's it, yes.
And that's reflected accurately on exhibits. Title A and B.
So,
Yes.
yeah, so A is the existing right now, and then B is what's proposed.
Did you have anything else like that? Does anybody have any questions in regards to that? Before we go to public comment?
Then you can verify that it begins and ends in the same place.
That is correct, yes. The reason that this is in front of you is to vacate an existing easement. The existing easement is a public sanitary sewer easement, and it's platted as such, so it's being recorded as such. The construction of the sanitary lateral is outside of that easement, and therefore, I guess that it needs to be vacated and corrected to the existing location of the sanitary. Small. That's way. Is that accurate? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open public comment. First, we're gonna address anybody who'd like to speak in favor of. If you'd like to speak in favor of, you can go ahead and stand up. And if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Derek Anderson, 1128 Gustafson Lane.
Okay, and Mr. Anderson, if anything you have to say.
I'm in favor of it. Shouldn't have been designed that way or allowed to be platted that way originally. To have an easement run through somebody's front yard when you have an easement 10 feet away. Made no sense, so I'm in favor.
Anybody else that would like to speak in favor of?
May we see those documents?
Okay, I think that's what it's listed.
You're good with everything?
I mean,
Or do you have any comment that you wanted to add?
I'm at 226 Golden, Joe Clark. I just hadn't seen these drawings yet. I was just curious what we were even talking about.
Okay,
But I mean, it doesn't seem like it affects any existing property owners at all, so I really don't have anything to comment. So, I'm good.
thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of? Anybody that would like to speak in opposition of? Any further comment from the board? Okay, at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing. And answer any conversation from the board. So the public hearing is closed. We'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes as described in Exhibit B.
If, I think just for clarification, and you just got here, it would be, the appropriate motion would be to make a favorable recommendation to the town council to approve this motion. Because we're not
To amend the PUD.
to amend the PUD.
To show the sanitary sewer easement in line with what's shown on exhibit B.
Because ultimately, we don't make the decision.
And then just point of clarification, can I make that motion to send it to myself?
Hopefully, 'cause otherwise we don't really want it.
Just send it to the council, yeah, the body.
I'll make a motion that we pass this on to the town council with a favorable recommendation.
Any discussion? Roll call, Michelle.
Travis Dunlap,
Yes.
Nicole Migalorni,
Yes.
Nick Loving,
Yes.
Sarah Audman,
Yes,
Jeremy McCarg,
Yes. You guys are welcome to stay and hang out if you want, but I mean, at this point, basically what's gonna happen is this is gonna get, we're gonna send it to the town council in an effort for them to possibly get it on their agenda, but you have to keep in mind that they meet in 2 days.
48 hours.
It's gonna be up to them. I've had a conversation. They said get it to them immediately. I don't know the outcome of that. I can't make any guarantees. But ultimately, as far as everything with this board, unless something completely changes, like we've done what we can do. And all that documentation.
Do I wait till the very end for all the comments to talk more about this whole situation that happened?
If you'd like to speak now, I mean, that's,
Fine.
okay, that's absolutely
So
fine.
just, and I don't even know if you guys know the whole, I kind of give a little backstory, so he's not here, but I took, I paid $250 for exhibits A and B to Great Lakes Engineering back in November. Where I brought it to Bill Arnie, he took pictures, sent it to engineer. And at some point, either the engineer spoke with Great Lakes Engineering or something. I paid $500 for them to bring to you guys last time what I did.
Okay.
And that was recommended by you guys. So then further, that didn't get approved, obviously. So then further down, this was apparently recommended. So then I paid another $500 and I'm like, well, what about the last one? They said, well, we were told to do it.
Which, so not to interrupt you, but my question would be, last meeting was the first time that I heard anything of your situation.
Correct.
So when you say that you brought to us guys, who are you
Brought
referring
it
to?
to Bill Arnie. I was told sanitary sewer.
Okay,
Showed him the exhibits, he took pictures of it. He sent it to him, he was talking with him. I don't know what happened from there. All I know is they legalized it and gave the amendment and that was $500. So as far as I was concerned, that was what I was told to do from not you guys, but
right, and
people
unfortunately,
here.
like, I don't think any of us can speak for the town, like whoever else you spoke to.
Can I comment?
Give me 1 second, okay? So in that aspect, like, we deal with plans, we're dealing with zoning, we're dealing with plating and surveying. So I think your questions and your problems are probably better addressed to the town council if there's something that you're trying to achieve through that.
Just,
The only thing I can say from our point of view is that when this was approved, there was an allotted sanitary sewer easement. And the reason we're here is because the owner of lot 4, Mr. Anderson, the lateral line missed that easement.
technically, it wouldn't matter unless I complained about it going through my yard. I could have just vacated the easement in general. So that wouldn't even have.
Okay, but we're arguing over,
Well, besides the fact, I was somebody, because he like, you gotta pay me $500. I said, why? Because I legalized it. I said, I didn't tell you to legalize it. Well, I talked to the engineer and everything, and that's what they decided to do.
right?
But then it's changed. That's
I think my issue
Great
is,
Lakes Engineering. That's just what they're telling me. So I'm going,
my issue is that everything you're speaking of, I have zero knowledge of.
understand.
So
Yep.
whatever you say, basically, I mean, I'll allow you to vent, I don't have a problem, but I don't have anything that I can comment back on because I wasn't privy to any of that information. So the only thing that I'm aware of is what you brought in front of us last month. And then we were able to set a public hearing, we were able to move your process forward. And now we're trying to actually turn it around quickly for you and
Yeah,
get it
no, you are.
to the council on
You are, I'm
Wednesday,
not, I'm just
if possible.
trying to figure out, again.
And if I could have, if this board could have done anything quicker, we would have. But the only issue is there's a process with notifying everybody it's a PUD, so we had to do it in public hearing. So there's a process that we have to legally follow and we can't bend those rules.
Yeah, no, I'm not complaining about the timing or anything. We got all that taken care of and it was on par with what you guys said. I was just frustrated that they're telling me I have to pay $5 more when I was. They were told to do this and I didn't tell them to do that. I'm like, well, and again, I don't know the ins and outs. I'm new to this stuff, but I asked them. They said they were really confused on why Burns Harbor is asking for this when the amendment. That's usually what Great Lakes Engineering said, and normally they would do that. They would just attach that because it's a private lot and it wouldn't even have to go to public hearing.
I think the confusion is that while it's a private lot, it's part of a PUD.
Like Shannon described what he did.
Right, I just want to make sure that you understand that the sanitary public, it's a public easement.
Yeah, and even last meeting, nobody knew that.
Right.
But you're go ahead, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You're good, you're good. I'm sorry too. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon, go ahead.
The PUD process is completely up to the developer and the developer engineers to set whatever they would like to actually see on the plat. So it's not, it's a completely discretion by the board as well to approve it or disapprove it. If it's engineered to function properly, the board can approve it or disapprove it. So it's up to the engineer, Great Lakes Engineering, to set where the easements or where the sanitary line will be. That's completely a design function, and the designer usually do that, or the engineer for the developer. During the platting itself, there is a public easement, a sanitary public easement that was actually set on the recorded plat, and it's a PUD, like I said. So it didn't have to follow the subdivision ordinance per se. It did follow the subdivision ordinance for a PUD. If you're following me, I guess. In relationship to the construction itself that happened, the sanitary lateral got constructed in different locations than that public sanitary easement. When Great Lake Engineering actually submitted the plat, they said that this is a public easement. We're not quite sure how to actually take it out. I said, well, it's a public hearing. The public has interest in that public easement. Anything that needs to be vacated for public, it needs to be a public hearing. And this body needs to hear it. So that's basically what I said. So I'm not quite sure where is the confusion.
So Irv, before we even got to the last meeting, they said, I was told by Bill Arnie, you need to get these exhibits stamped and sealed. Is what he told me. You need to get this sealed by Great Lakes Engineering. So I took it back to them and said, they're requesting, and I don't know if that was through you or whatnot, then I need to have this sealed. So then they did whatever they do and said, that's $500. And I said, okay.
I think Bill Arnie requested that an as-built needs to be sealed. An as-built meaning that the construction of that lateral and the location of that lateral needs to be actually certified by either the engineer that designed the plat.
Yeah, that's what,
Right. So the exhibit itself, it shows here, especially on exhibit B. Exhibit B is an as-built of the actual location of the sanitary lateral.
Yep.
And that is a requirement for any subdivision, that the lateral needs to be certified as far as the location of those laterals. So Bill Arnie did his job correctly. Like he requested the as-built for.
So do you know what? I guess, and this might be Great Lakes Engineering, do you know what I paid them $500 for?
I
First
can't
time?
speak for the company.
They said it was a different amendment.
I wish I
I'm
could.
trying to learn, I'm trying to learn, because I'm like, they said that they spoke with you, and this is what the town is requiring.
I spoke to them actually recently, like in the last 2 weeks. I did
Yeah,
not speak to
correct.
them in November or so. That might have been somebody else in the town spoke to them, but my thing, I guess, when I spoke to them, they needed to vacate an existing public easement, and this body needs to hear it, and that's what I said. So that's what happened.
Okay. And it needs to be replatted, it can't be an amendment that's attached.
Unfortunately, the town doesn't have any administrative subdivision process. So any public easement in a plat or recorded in a plat, existing plat, which this was existing until this body actually reverted that right now, until the council actually signed it, it'll be recorded again. So my point, I guess, any easement, any public easement that it has been recorded and it needs to be vacated or changed in any way, the body of the town needs to hear it, the land commission needs to hear it. And it needs to be an amended plat. There is other processes in other towns, but in this town, for transparency.
No, I'll take that back to him and see. Right, what the heck I did.
No, it's a good process actually for transparency. You know, that
Oh, yeah.
any plat that comes in front of the town needs to be in a public hearing. Or any change to the plat. I hope that answered the question.
No, yeah, sort of, I guess.
I don't want to cut you off. Are you done? I know, Mr. Anderson, did you have something you wanted to comment further?
Kind of, I mean. So to begin with, I know you say the designer, the engineer, the developer is responsible, they can put an easement basically wherever they want, is what you say, right?
And the PUD process,
So
not
they
even
can put
something.
it, they can put an easement wherever they want in the PUD process.
Correct.
So as a homeowner who's buying a lot in the PUD, you would think the professionals would look at where these easements are going and say, well, wait a second, this doesn't make sense to run this easement right through where somebody can build a house when there's actually an easement that the sewer line can be put in.
That's
I mean, that's,
definitely a
what do you
development.
guys, I mean, we're paying you guys to do these things to help protect the citizens of this town. But then you're just rubber stamping whatever these guys show you.
In the PUD process.
I know what a PUD process is, trust me.
No, I understand that.
I'm just trying to comment, I'm
Okay.
trying to help you guys. I mean,
Right, no, I understand what you're saying, but we're trying to keep this cordial, okay?
Yeah, I'm trying to-
Ultimately, if a developer comes here and they meet all of the guidelines for PUD and everything is, it meets the code. We only can go so far like, this would be more cosmetic in this area or more functional. The problem is that particular property contains so much wetlands that there were so many, we didn't know where the building envelope was gonna be. But ultimately,
There's an easement that was
Okay.
established.
unfortunately, there's nothing else that we can do.
I
with
know,
this.
I know you can't do anything else. I'm just, for future, maybe you guys can pay a little more diligence to what's going on in some of these PUDs, because the PUDs are very
Okay.
uncommon.
And
The
Jeremy, if I may, and I don't know if it's reflected in any of the minutes from 2018-19, but I believe that there was some discussion about this at the time, and the developer indicated to either this body or to the town council that lots 3 and 4 would likely be sold to the same owner. And only one house would be built on that.
But
And
again,
obviously, that's not what happened,
yeah, that's
but
why,
that's that.
did you have that in writing?
Because there was, when he gave us the plats. it
Yeah.
Show,
I think it may be. in
I
some
did
minutes.
show
That there was two lots
proposed buildings for
combined?
both.
Yeah,
Both of the
it's,
lots show proposed buildings.
I think. the-
just so that before we get too far off track.
Yeah.
Your question was reflected in the minutes when it was approved. I believe it was September of 2019. If you go through and read the minutes, it's actually reflected in there. I know because I was in the discussion as far as the fire hydrant placement, as far as lots 3 and 4. So if you go back, it is reflected. Just for clarification, I read that this past month as well. Did you have something you wanted to add before we move on?
Well, I think that we have to be careful that we, as no matter if it's the town, the planning commission, or whatever, we do not go outside of the rules that have been provided to protect all people involved in the process. That there's not people who don't have the authority commenting on somebody else's rights. So we have a certain place we stop at it. It's not that people we get an opportunity even to go beyond those rules. That's set up by the state and also by local municipalities for everyone's protection.
Okay, so you have a review process you guys go through. And if something doesn't seem, I don't know, logically correct, you guys don't say anything?
It's not our place to tell Mr. Clahy what to do with his PUD.
You make recommendations all the time on things.
You can make a recommendation, that doesn't mean that they are bound.
I'm good.
Platting is a right, it's an absolute right to the landowner themselves, so any plat is a right to that owner. And the owner can plat it as they wish.
With your approval.
Yes, but that's them though.
Technically, they can't plat it as they wish.
Yes, they can.
So then why do you have the process to approve it? They can just do whatever they want.
There's still codes that have to be abided by.
Hey,
And I understand like what, where you ran your lateral connection line, it makes a whole lot more sense. It benefits him, it benefits you because you don't have to pull it back up. I mean, technically, it was a public easement. I mean, we didn't even have to go through the process. Legitimately, we could have said that you need to put your lateral within the easement because it missed it. Nobody wanted to do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't benefit anybody to do that.
I'm not,
It hurts you and it hurts you because it,
I'm venting a little bit because it impacts.
right, I understand, but you don't have any business in front of this board at this
No,
point,
this
okay? And
process-
you're venting to the people that, unfortunately, the majority of the people in this room weren't here in 2019.
The one,
So that's part of the
the
problem.
one I paid for is,
The one you paid for.
well,
Okay, well, that's something you need to take up with Global on a private manner, not in our public meeting.
I'm paying for him. It's a public meeting. I paid for Glenn or Jim. I pay for Global. I'm a taxpayer. Taxpayer money pays him. So I'm done. Okay, you guys can keep
But
going.
if you want to be fair on it, so is Mr. Clay a taxpayer.
Yeah,
So I think that we should just not be going back.
no, actually, he's not. He doesn't live here.
He was at the time, he owned the property until you and Mr. Henry bought the lots.
All right, we're moving on to old business now. First item is the fee table. I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir, go right ahead.
Were we all three supposed to sign this, him, us, and you guys?
Him being who, please?
Derek Anderson, he's on here for some reason.
Well, Derek Anderson shouldn't be on there because we're only modifying that on lot 3, not lot 4.
Hold on, it says, because it affects both lots. It has mine and his name on it. And I guess, sorry. I
No,
know.
you're fine, you're fine. If there's an issue, I'd like to address it.
Yeah, so I guess my other question is, this is, and you might, is this plat now, because we signed it in our name or something?
Whoever is the owner for lot 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Needs to sign it.
Okay,
So
But it's a public easement and you cannot have it removed. It runs with the land. Whoever are future owners of lots 3 and 4, that easement affects those.
Yes.
And those lots are purchased subject to those easements.
Doesn't the easement stop at my property line though? It doesn't go on.
yeah, it doesn't even go onto your
How does
property.
it affect me?
it's an amended plot.
Yeah, but the easement never went on there.
So the amendment is gonna affect you as far as like any future, if you had to do any future work for your sanitary sewer, it would have to be conducted within that easement on lot 3. You wouldn't be able to just put it, that's how it affects you, because obviously that supplies your sanitary sewer, right? So that's how you're being affected, because otherwise, if you recognize the original one, you would say that you had access here as opposed to the new place where your lateral is actually located. That's the only reason.
So I just want to make sure that,
You have a great question. Hey, Shem, in the question he has as far as those signatures, what are they supposed to be doing? Signing that and taking that where?
To the town council and the recorder office.
But does the town council have to approve it first before they sign the Mylars?
Correct.
Yes.
So do we need them to sign that and then we need to get that to the town council, or do they need to get that to the town council?
Either or, as long as the town council sign it and they sign it.
They have to
The
provide
amended
the
files.
Mylars, so at the town council
correct.
meeting.
That's correct.
So ultimately, just for clarification, your signature and your signature, if you both agree. And then that our motion was to send this to the town council with a favorable recommendation for approval. Yeah. So it'll have to go to the town council and they'll ultimately be the one to say yes or no to our recommendation. Does that make sense? And they'll be the ones that have to sign off, because we can't, we can make a recommendation, but we can't amend a PUD. It's like an ordinance, we can't.
So what are we signing?
Do you have the Mylars? Do you know the
You
Mylars?
don't even know what
They're like
Mylar
they're
is.
like a class sort of a piece.
Nothing.
You will need to get that.
I don't think he needs to get them until it's actually approved. So once it's approved, we'll get the Mylars. Then he'll
And the
drop them
town
off.
council usually signed it after the.
I thought they're holding something in your hand that needed signed.
Well, that's what.
It wasn't on my copy, that's why.
He's not sure what the process.
I have no idea. You know, I'm just-
What was your question about the signature, I guess?
I just need to get shit done, build a house. So what do I need to do?
So
I mean, he's gonna apply for permits.
Are you coming to the town council meeting on Wednesday?
Apparently.
You should, it's on the agenda for Wednesday.
What? Okay, so it is, okay.
Yes.
So what do I need to, do I need to bring something?
No, because you wouldn't go through the expense of procuring Mylars until
Without the
on Wednesday. Why would you pay for Mylars without the approval ahead of time?
Unless the council is intending to actually approve it, but you're absolutely right. Wait until the approval, then get the Mylar.
So just show up, and I paid him 500 to legalize it, so I hope that's what the heck they're talking about. So just show up
Yeah, be at the town council meeting on Wednesday.
here, same place,
Yeah,
Same place.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock Wednesday.
All right.
Mr. President, I just want to say something for the record. I'm sorry.
absolutely, go ahead.
I apologize, but there's a question, I guess, about the sanitary sewer easement, that it's actually for a service line. This is not a main for the town. So the town actually doesn't own that line. If this was a sanitary line that is owned by the town, we could have probably said something. This is actually a private line, the responsibility of the homeowner. So the service line could be anywhere in this lot.
That did get brought up last meeting also.
Correct. So I just want to make sure for the record though, because it seems like, there is a review process that we rubber stamp. We don't rubber stamp, we review actually. And the service line itself, it's actually servicing that home only, that person only. So it's not a main that is owned by the town, and we're not reviewing it on the behalf of the town for the main itself. So you don't own that sanitary line. So we did our due diligence. The developer decided to actually put that sanitary line anywhere. It could be a private easement. So the town could actually be outside of that easement. So they can have a private easement. And I said that to Great Lake Engineering. So you chose to actually vacate a public sanitary easement. That's your choice. That is completely your choice. And that's exactly what we're reviewing here, and that's exactly why we're.
So if it's his choice, why is it?
I just want to put that for the record.
So public,
Well, because if we didn't go through this process, he wouldn't be able to vacate what's there, which means that he can't put his house where he wants to. I mean,
And I
that's
did say that.
ultimately the issue right now.
I did say that. to
So-
Great Lake Engineering.
so as it lies currently, I guess, that's a public for Maine?
It's not, it's not, it's a service. That's completely up to either a public easement or a private easement for any service line that is servicing that lot. So it's completely up to you. So for example, if you're adding a line or a service line to the main that is in the street, between the main and the property line, that's public. But you're still responsible for that line.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the same here. It's a public easement to provide that sanitary line. It doesn't mean that service line is a main. It's not. It's actually a private line. You are responsible for it.
The line's private, the easement's public.
Correct? And that was your choice, not ours.
For what?
I have no idea. You need to ask that to the developer.
I just needed, well, all I said was I need to put my house here and I can't with the public easement being there.
Correct. That is correct.
So what are you getting at? I'm just a little off. My choice to.
Your choice to have it either public or private, as long as you have an easement crossing another land to actually connect to a public sanitary sewer.
I didn't ask, okay, maybe I didn't ask to,
I think maybe the different way to put it is, you could put the house in a different location or a different design footprint that would have accommodated the public easement as is. I'm not saying that's what should have been done, but that's an alternative to having to do or doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah,
So,
All I'm saying, the service line in the public easement, it is your responsibility.
correct.
And that location could be anywhere in the line. So you chose to have it that way, or the developer chose to have it that way.
Yeah, so
It could be the
so,
shortest distance at the time for the developer, not for the town.
Yeah.
The town does not own that line.
correct.
So we review the public entity. Private lines is your private line. If you want to have the shortest distance, it's completely up to you.
Okay.
I hope that explained.
Yeah, a little bit. I
Your
just,
process.
I mean, yeah, I just didn't really. I'm not complaining about
No,
the public area, that's just is what it is, so.
There was a.
Ultimately, you're gonna be here Wednesday at 7, though, right?
Wednesday at 7 o'clock, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure you go.
No, that's fine. Sarah, so back to old business fee table. Sarah, would you like to run with this real quick, just so,
Unfortunately for all of us, I sent you that fee table.
yeah.
And I couldn't find it in 5 minutes before I ran out the door, so I don't have a copy of it with me, but I don't know if I can find it or not. Basically, what it was that the fee table change was going to be possible in regard to shipping containers. And I believe that we had decided that we were not going to say anything about shipping containers on the fee table. The other part of the fee table,
Yeah, so we got that actually right underneath that. Clay, can you touch a little bit on that, the storage container fees, which the question that came up all because of the BZA thing. If the BZA actually grants a variance into allowing a storage container in residential, should that even be something that we are involved in? Or like, would it be up to the BZA to establish a fee for them, like what to apply?
Yeah, I would say no. So any changes to the P table obviously can start here and are finalized with town council. I'm just trying to look up some emails I sent on the subject. So if the BZA is going to grant a variance, which they did not, to have a shipping container in a residential area, they can put conditions on that, including, you know, yearly costs or fees to that. I would recommend against having a fee for shipping containers in a residential zone, just because that would imply to the public at large and the future members of this body and the BZA and the town council that, yeah, we don't allow it, but here's, we're leaving the door cracked open.
Right.
If you want to allow it, I think it's better left as it is and just let the BZA know, and that was discussed with Mr. Popra and others, you know, if you allow, if you decided to allow shipping container in a residential zone, you can place conditions that can be, you know, for a period of time or, you know, whatever to just this property owner, but ultimately the BZA shot it down, I think, by a 5-0 vote saying no. So again, my recommendation is do not have a fee for shipping containers in a residential zone, we leave the fee table as is.
I found mine too.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the rest of the fee table, and Jeremy had sent this out to everybody, and reflected a couple of things. And the main one was, as based on our discussion at the last meeting in February, there was consensus that if the same house was going to be built in residential or RC1, that there should not be a difference in the permit fee for that house. And I sent along the a suggested thing, which would say, so our table 15.1, which is a fee schedule for R and RC1, residential use R and RC1, that's the subheadline. The improvement type, it would say basically the same as what it is now, new construction, $100 plus 20 cents per square foot of finished residential space and 12 cents per square foot of unfinished space, per unit. The rest of the items would remain the same. And then if you go to a little further down, it would say mixed use RC1, which was what this would address. And a building that would be mixed use would be more than just residential, it would be more than commercial. So therefore we have that fee that says $100 per plus 25 cents per square foot of finished residential space and 17 cents per square foot of unfinished space per unit. And that would separate how, like, whether it was, and I have a question on this for the attorney. If it's commercial space and residential space, would they have the two spaces? Are those actually considered two separate uses?
What's the zoning district?
Well, it's RC1 or downtown, which allows those mixes of having residential and commercial. Or does the commercial use make it only a commercial building?
I guess I would need more specifics or more of an example, I don't know. But
If you've got a building 2 or 3 stories, the bottom, it would be a commercial use and the upstairs would be an apartment. Whether it's owner occupied or rented out.
And so are you talking about for the permit fees?
Yes,
And when did you send this email? Because I'm looking for it, I don't know if.
I think this was just sent out to the board as far as for just to open initial discussion in regards to this. I don't know that you were attached on this.
He's not, you have it now in your mailbox, Clay.
Okay. I would say that maybe that's something that needs to be looked at to see if we need to revisit the permit fees or inspection fees or what have you for that specific districts, just so we.
that is what we were looking at. And we
Okay.
started with doing the residential only permit fee. So that would be if you had the same 1,500 square foot house on a basement, an unfinished basement, whether you were in Cortland's Landing or in the village in Burns Harbor, that fee would be the same, the permit fee.
So-
If you changed it, then and added commercial to it, then that's what we were trying to trigger or change so that it was equitable for the same house. I had done a little mock-up on the cost, and it ends up being about $150 difference in permit fee costs from one zone to the other for the same house.
Yeah, I just think it's something that, I don't know, if this board wants to put together a committee of 3 of you to hash this out and make those clarifications, because obviously this would be changes to town code and the fee table.
With that particular, we talked about in our last meeting.
Okay.
So that was a simple one, but my question was, then, do you have to address a mixed-use building as a separate fee or approach?
I guess I have a question with that though, because if it had like, I mean, there's so many variables, because if you had a commercial lower half, potentially with all the electric and plumbing and systems through the residential, fire prevention, everything else, it shouldn't be mixed use, because I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to do full commercial inspections through the whole top of the building. I mean, if there's,
And that's my question, wouldn't it just then take it to commercial, the commercial schedule, which is down further and so much per.
And you have commercial on the second floor too.
Yes,
I think that's somewhere
You could have,
Yeah.
or you could have residential on the ground, first and second floors. So it's just, like Jeremy said, there's so many variables, so I think that for that RC1 district, there maybe should be.
This would also be for downtown district. It also has mixed use. But RC1 is now separated out, so I'm sorry, you are correct.
But I think it just, all of it needs to be looked at.
I agree, and I like the idea of doing a subcommittee. The other question I have though is when you're going through that fee table. I don't think there's an issue if we end up reducing a inspection rate. But if we throw a new number that is an increase on that fee table, what do we need to do? Like, I mean, because we can't arbitrarily just throw like say, hey, this is gonna be more money for this inspection. We would have to, what all would we need, Clay?
Oh, so you're
Like
telling-
if our building commissioner wants to increase an inspection fee as we're going through this table, what supporting documentation, like to be able to back up the reason for increasing this? I mean, would it just be like, kind of, hey, what other surrounding communities are doing?
I think that's a start to see what other, the county and other local municipalities, cities and towns are doing as far as that, but I mean, ultimately, if it's a fee that's within town code, that needs to be changed via an ordinance.
Right, I just figured that if we're gonna make any increases, that we would need some supporting documentation to do that.
Yeah, I think that.
As opposed to just random arbitrary numbers like,
Sure.
hey, 75 sounds great, let's do that.
Well, no, that's part of the thing. We have a $35 fee for every time they go out, or the base fee. I just want to make sure that we're actually covering our costs.
No,
You know?
I agree.
And I don't know what that would take. So do we need to ask the building department, when you're running these papers the first time, how many hours does it take? I don't know how long it's been since this has been changed. And I don't know if there's any kind of insurance that's tied to these things or anything like that. So I'm just saying that I think if we're looking at it, might be a good time to look at some of the other things as well.
Anything to add here? Like, obviously, we're all talking about you and you're quiet over there, so I'm just
Well,
curious.
I've only been here a year and I'm developing this as much as possible, but yes, there is a difference in a commercial inspection as to a residential inspection, absolutely, there's more to it.
Right, but so if you were inspecting like what we were talking about.
Right, where you had a commercial property on the first floor, there's more things that come into play with smoke detectors and lighting ways, there's emergency safety features that have to be put in the building. And then as it's being built, what's above it, if there's apartments building, all of that changes. And there's a lot more that has to be looked at than just a building that's gonna be just an apartment building or whatever.
So in your eye, would you rather see us treat a mixed use building just as a commercial building?
Probably be the easiest, rather than, okay, wait, I'm going here, while I'm here for 25 minutes on my commercial inspection, and then I go upstairs and I'm on. Yeah, if a commercial, I think if it comes into commercial property, the whole thing should be considered a commercial building, and then that way that fee addresses it and it solves the problem, rather than me trying to divide residential from commercial. I think you go to the upper fee. If somebody's going to divide, and it's usually if somebody's going to rent this, there's more to it as far as the fire department, there's more inspections involved, there's more paperwork involved in this town that's going to make more work. So therefore, if somebody's going to put commercial mixed use in a building, that should automatically bring it to a commercial setting.
So then on this suggested table I had, reason I was thinking about it afterwards, then I would amend where it says residential use R and RC1 and make that residential use only R and RC1 and strike the bottom part where we do the mix.
And just make it commercial.
And that are, yeah, if there's anything beyond residential use only, it kicks it to the commercial food, which is already listed, I believe, for that district. But, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask who's all really interested in being part of a subcommittee on this? Any volunteers? Well,
Everybody step back one.
This is an easy one, Travis. But I had a couple of questions too to go with that when you're ready. not with who's on the committee. But, why is there a different fee for pools and fences? Because that rather, as opposed to other accessory improvements. And why isn't it unfinished basement included in accessory improvements instead of remodeling existing residential, which is a category that's already there? And I already asked about the $35 base fee, so those are just little questions. And whoever.
Can Jack answer that? Why is unfinished basements included in accessory improvements instead of remodeling existing residential?
I would not be able to answer that,
Okay,
but I would like to. be-
well, I just don't want to do a bunch of research if you can explain it right now.
I think that's something that Travis and Jack and the other committee members can
Need to get together.
get into. The dust there.
Sarah, are you wanting to be part of this?
No.
Do it.
No.
Okay,
I think
I'll take a break, thanks.
a small unknown rule of parliamentary procedures, you add people who are absent to the committee.
I'm gonna reserve that right to the next time, so.
And hold on to that power, Jeremy, don't use it.
Use it when necessary. So Michelle, just for documentation, there's gonna be a subcommittee in reference to the fee table. It's gonna consist of Travis running the show and then Nicole and myself. And we're gonna meet somewhere on Skylark, because it's close.
And you might have more room than me.
I think my house is centrally located.
That is true.
I don't think that'd be proper though, we got a quorum here.
I can do all my work.
You can always do it by, it doesn't have to be in person. It's easier to jump on a Zoom or something, just do this committee, and it's not a public meeting, that have to be noticed up, so.
So those that aren't on this committee though, my suggestion would be if you have any questions,
I already did
Sarah,
try.
if you have any questions, either submit them to the entire board, just as posing a question, just so that we have an opportunity to get ahead of it and encompass that while we're actually meeting, as opposed to, hey, we got this great draft, and then, oh, but I had a question.
Do you have the copy of the email that Jeremy sent out?
Yes.
Because that has my questions on it, so.
I'll have to read commercial one. See how that's done.
Okay, but we'll try and have at least some sort of direction for next meeting or something.
This is listed on old business, and I think it kind of applies to what we had already tonight. I don't know if you went now, it has to do with PUD process.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I find would be possibly helpful is if there was some, and maybe there is, and I just don't know it. Is there some kind of a timeline that records the activity on each PUD as it moves through the process and as it's amended or as it's recertified? So that there would be an easily accessible reference point that you could find out when things happened or what was approved or was it recorded, what was approved. And I don't know if
So
there is.
I think you're posing a question that there's nobody in here to answer it. Well, Michelle, do you think there'd be a possibility? So,
Is there something like
This-
that?
because we already know some of the history behind it, maybe we could pull the PUD from our office. Let's just say from what we just did for this Trail Creek subdivision. And see if there's kind of a timeline of events, see how it's actually categorized and put together. So if we see if there's a problem or not, those records should be maintained in the Plan Commission / BZA office. That's what I found out this week, so
Okay,
we should have that.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, very good. So maybe that's something we can address for
Yeah,
next
well-
meeting, because I don't know what it looks like as far as. I mean, honestly, she hasn't had to look any of that up yet.
No, but we'll go off of the hot topic and let's just go to the village because everybody likes the village. You know, that there have been time points when there was a relook by the plan commission and a reacceptance by the town council just within the last couple of years. So I mean, it would be easier for future bodies, if there's any questions, to say, no, look, here, what happened this date, then you could go and find where the minutes were. And so you get more details, at least there's an idea what happened when.
You're describing an index that says at the September BZA meeting in 2016, this happened related to the village.
Mhm.
I can assure you, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that's required to be kept. I mean, it's all public record. It's just not neatly organized, as it seems like, and it makes sense for, you know, but
I mean, I guess my question would be like, if she pulled one of those files, like, what it would look like, or if it's just all by date and just like, good luck.
I'm gonna guess there's no file to pull. It's just gonna be, I have the minutes from these meetings and the documents that correspond to it. You know, like I said, the PUD, until you said it was 2018 or 19, I didn't know when this, you know, technically had that PUD.
I didn't either until I looked through every agenda until I found it in 2019.
Yeah, there was no, we had did a timeline back a ways, I had done a timeline for Pat Clayton's property, but there was no direction as to what was supposed to be and what wasn't supposed to be, or how it was or how it wasn't. We just did a timeline and I pulled every minute, but there was nothing structurally anywhere that could tell me this is what should have been formulated or where it was at, or what's finalized, just as what Sarah's asking. And that is definitely something, as we grow, there's gonna be more PUDs, there's gonna be more questions. I mean, we even had it to where the town council was wanting to know what BZA was doing, what BZA was doing with the plan commission. And the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, and I like it. Again, I'm probably sticking my neck out here, but there's gotta be some formula that can put all of these together, other than just minutes that we read.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that. I think just starting with the smallest portion as far as like what you're talking about, being directed on a specific property and development so that we have a timeline. And if we were gonna do that, I think it'd be just a matter of figuring out how we wanted to do it and making sure that we're all okay with it. And then we can modify the rules that are in chapter 14. We have that authority. I mean, it's up to the council, but like they can be changed.
And
So.
I would think to make the most efficient use of time and resources, I don't know that it's worth doing to go back at this point over everything. I think if we just start now on anything new that starts, to start with that, whatever index with you would, and the information you would want, but just going forward to make it easier.
No, I agree.
and it's just a matter of who's gonna keep those records, because it could be as simple as on a computer, a file folder, you know, XYZ PUD, you know, XYZ neighborhood PUD. And then here's their application, here's a PDF copy of every document, the documents that they submit to the town or to a town body. And then minutes of those various board and commission and council meetings, you know, signed off and approved, just to be kept in one concise place, but it's, and then when, who keeps it, and when that person moves on from the town, and how many ever months or years, then who's keeping it? It's just the consistency of the institutional knowledge. And
San Joe County, they have a GIS system that actually tells about every subdivision that they have. And it gives just about every minutes that documented about this subdivision online. And it's a very, very helpful tool.
And I think that the sanitary board has something similar that we have here with regards to the various lines in town, but I don't know if it can be related or there's a way to link documents for a specific.
It's not a parcel driven,
Yeah.
or it's not a subdivision driven, but it's sanitary line driven, you're right. But San Joe County might be a really good example on the GIS system that they have for all their subdivisions.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's just a matter of working out to see what is possible and what
Yeah, you don't want to make it overcome, but it would be helpful, I think, for the future. Especially as people change on the planning commission or on the town council or the secretaries or commissioners or whoever. So that's all.
All right, we already kind of addressed storage container fees and that whole mess on the whole business, so we're moving on to new business, review of bonds, maintenance guarantees, letters of credit. Something coming up. It's pertinent. June day maintenance.
Actually, it's probably closer than we realize.
Actually, yeah.
I was thinking about it, it is March.
What about these ones on here that Cortland's Landing that expired over a year ago, or the Trail Creek letter credit?
So I can speak on the Cortland's Landing ones that I had talked to Tom, and he was not in a rush to come pick up his checks. He's been advised, I personally made contact with him, and we can't take them off until like we're no longer holding the funds. Yeah,
Is the maintenance bond?
There's a sewer line flush,
I don't know what to say.
a maintenance and an infrastructure guarantee, so. And then there's another, the Trail Creek Phase 1 letter credit maintenance.
well. The Trail Creek one, I know there was just communication just recently, I don't know if it's in regards to that one. Where he was requesting Jane to mail it, and I was included in that email, so that might be that one.
Okay.
But I know there was communication and Jane was gonna put that in the mail, I just don't know that it's off of this. The last communication with Tom Lightfoot, he informed me that he was gonna be coming back before this board, and that's when he would address that. So. Okay, new business solar panel discussion.
You told me you had it on the agenda.
Actually, I'd like to start with Jack on this. I mean,
Yeah, we've got our first home, residential home is requesting a permit to put solar panels on the roof of their home. This is in the village, so therefore it had to go through Sarah also, or through their covenants.
Architecture review.
Right, and basically, there's no verbiage in our town that states anything about permits or inspections or anything for solar. What I did do is I contacted around to local building commissioners in the towns. I've got one to return back to me, this Porter. They actually have them on, the houses on the beach have 3 homes that have the solars. The only thing they're requesting or requiring their towns is to pull a permit for it and to have an electrical inspection, where in other words, they're tying into NIPSCO, so NIPSCO wants to be aware when one of these are tied in, so that somebody looks at it and makes sure that the tying is correctly done. So again, going back to the fee schedule, or as far as inspections go, I mean, right now I'm going to be charging $35 to go do an electrical inspection and $35 to look at, because the biggest concern with this is we have homes that have truss roofs and we have homes that have stick built. Homes that are truss roof, when they do the load count for those roofs, the engineer that builds that home, or when it's approved, is for a snow load. There was nothing put in there, and I know there's access, I mean, they don't do exact numbers. And again, I'm not an engineer, and they say I want here to back me up a little bit, but bottom line is when they put these panels onto the home, is the existing truss roof or the existing stick built going to sustain and hold when all of a sudden you've got roof, you've got snow on there, you've got wind load, you've got all these possibilities conforming to that. What is it for me as building commissioner to say, yes, that's all I'm gonna do? We do have it on commercial right now, but this is the first residential. And I just.
Probably. I guess my question is, how are you gonna be able to make that determination?
Well, I talked to the solar company that's putting that in before, when they address a residential person that's interested in doing a solar system, they do have an engineer from their company come out and look at what's in there, and they send paperwork to us that says, yes, what is existing there will hold the weight of the solar panels that are going on, whether, and if it isn't, then they would address and say what has to be added to it to do that. That is a signed document from their engineer. Is that something I need to send to our engineer to also look at it? I mean, again, I'm not an engineer, I'm just going by my knowledge of what I've seen in the past with these solar systems.
If it's stamped by their engineer, it should be fine. If the company is actually stamping this and saying that it'll function properly, I think
Usually from the installer, not the manufacturer.
Right, yeah, yeah,
That is totally like
it's the installer, right, it's through the solar company themselves, like, I asked them, did they actually have somebody go and look in the attic to see if it's stick built or truss roof? And then they determined that all that they're putting on there, and the only other concern I had was how this is being attached to the building. And in the village's instance, they were concerned about the looks of it, but what cosmetic wise, which they have to follow some of their regulations, but as far as the building department is concerned, I wanted to make sure that the electrical and the application of this was done properly. And they're like Jim just said, if there's an engineer stamp on it, then we should be fine. But I didn't know if I.
So
verbiage.
specifically though, you're looking like, so if you're looking for us to add something to the code that would require an engineer's stamped approval. Is there anything else specific that you're looking that like is gonna make your job easier with this? Or be able to cover, I mean, ultimately, you're gonna be the one working with this. I mean, I'm not gonna have anything to do with solar panels. This is all in play.
Actually, you might be.
No, absolutely not.
You never know, you might want to put this on your house. No, I'm just saying, no, other than the electrical inspection, which the electrical inspection, we're just looking for the proper application on the side of the house and where that's all going. And the wiring and the conduit that they use to do that. But that again is all in the specs of what the company that's putting it in there, that engineer is stamping on, it's all following the codes that they need. So, yeah, the only thing being is that we had nothing in our books. And I didn't know if we needed it because it might be covered under the IRC or the NRC. But would it be better to have something in?
I would agree with that.
I think that the purpose, that one of the reasons I would feel that we should do something is so we avoid that gray area we got into swimming pools. Where at one time, somebody said, well, this is the way I want it, and then later on, there was, well, why, what was that based on? And so I think we need to have something that's documentable and traceable, and it doesn't have a lot of subjectivity in it. And there's, for instance, one thing that came up that Jack didn't mention, but the fire department, for the village, when we were asking, so if somebody wants to do this, what should we be looking for? One of the things that the fire department said is that they wanted to have approval of the access on the exterior of the building to the disconnect. So in the event that there was a fire, they could shut it off right away. So there's some of those things that could go along with this engineer's report.
Has anybody looked into to see if that's already required in the International Building Code? Like, I assume that's what you're referencing.
Correct,
Like, do we know if that's already a required thing?
not for the residential, but for commercial, yes. So any commercial building, adding structure to it, requires a professional engineer stamp or an architectural stamp. Yes, in the statement, yeah. For residential, I think some locality, requires that.
I'm talking about, so she was referencing like a cutoff, like electrically.
Oh, I'm sorry, electrical.
Yeah, no, I'm like, wow, I totally missed this.
Yeah, my apologies.
So like an electrical to be able to disconnect the system, so I don't know. I mean, I think that'd be something we need to look like, is it already there? I mean, are we stating, like, that's what I'm getting at, are we stating redundant code? I mean, I think that'd be something that fortunately we'll have to dig into that.
For the electrical, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Right.
But-
Jack, have you looked at that at all?
I haven't looked into it yet, and again, respectfully, I'm bothered by 30 hours a week right now.
No, I understand.
So my time is, I mean, to follow up on all these things and do all of this, I'm buried, so I would need help on this.
But along with that, the swimming pools are also governed by the state code. And we, for ease of use, for our residents and the building department opted to have a specific code for that since it's less well done. So, whatever, I just want us to
I mean,
consider deliberately the process we get into, whatever it's gonna be.
Right, I mean, a couple things, one, obviously, if we have solar coming here and we don't, like, so is the one in the village already installed?
no,
Okay, I would say good, because potentially, like, if it is supposed to have a disconnect from International Building Code, and we don't know whether it has one or not, like, I would think that's a problem. It's like, we need to brush up on that and figure it out.
But the installer would presumably know that and comply with that.
Presumably is a big
Yeah,
word though.
no, I agree. I would suggest also if there's any thought or plan to, add something with regards to solar to some, to town code, that we don't try to reinvent the wheel, that we look at what state regulations are, that we use our membership in AIM, the Association of Indiana Municipalities, to see what other cities and towns have done with regards to the process and procedure and codes, et cetera, for installations of solar panels on residential and or commercial properties, and take the best of what is already existing in other communities in Indiana.
This go probably be a pretty good resource for that.
not to throw more kink into this, but the other thing that's coming into town, and actually I believe is already here, it's just that nobody's pulled a permit on, is the EV systems for electric cars. That's gonna be the other thing, but I don't know but if we're gonna address this, that should be included in whoever's working on this to try and come up with. Again, using the state codes, I mean, that's what we did with the swimming pool, but for a homeowner or for somebody to sit there and say, okay, this is what you need to follow by state code, they can look it up. And to try and understand where they're going to and how they can read the verbiage is there to know what they need to do on their site, on their property. There's a big disconnect there, and that's why I'm just trying to get this spelled out a little easier, that's all. Does that make sense? or am
Is
I-
it more appropriate if it is in the state code already addressed, that for homeowners or people who are applying for a permit, that we just have the reference linked to that place in the state code as opposed to adding yet another section?
Well, I don't know how Attorney Patton feels about this, but like, I'm not big on stating like the International Building Code or state code, word for word verbatim in our town code, because then we have to be smart enough to know when they changed it.
Mhm.
I would rather reference their code.
Right.
That way, when they change it, we're automatically up to date. Otherwise, it's just too much work to stay on top of it. And I understand it's nice that it's easy for the people here, but it's not easy for all of us because we're gonna have too many spots in our town code that we can't
Well, that's why I'm
keep
wondering
on.
if we have an information page, maybe on the town website, that says, if you want to know what the specifics are on solar installation, click here. It goes right to the reference in the state code. That, to me, that makes more sense than having yet another ordinance going through the expense of a public hearing to duplicate what's already in the state code. But
Well, you're still gonna have an ordinance to adopt what's in.
yes,
So if like the electrical vehicle, like, so if that's already in the electric code, is that all International Building Code?
Correct, and the public right of way. If it's in the public right of way, if the charger actually in the public right of way, I believe you have a lot of say so into it. So you can have the liberty to do whatever you'd like to see in those EV stations in the
Right.
public right of way.
I think a lot of Jack's concerns are like private homes that are putting chargers in that. Right. I
Or
mean,
out of the public right.
yeah,
So outside of the public right of way, normally it becomes a residential code, the state's residential code.
okay,
And I would think with the interstates, that those would likely be either at car dealerships or at the gas stations, truck stops.
Well, they're gonna be residentials because people are bringing their cars home.
Sure.
We already have them out.
I can say someone driving from
Oh, right, there will be,
Iowa to
right, there are,
Pennsylvania,
there are.
they're gonna get off here and
Yeah, they'll
sit
get
and
gas
charge
stations.
and go to.
And they're already being
Restaurant.
installed at the dealerships. Bozak's got them in 3 locations right now, and then another one's being installed in the Kia very shortly. Those again, I'm not too concerned with because when they fall into that, they're falling under commercial codes and they're following the state regulations because of a car dealership. When you get into residential, that's us as a town looking at a residential home, and there's certain specific things that I have to get aware of.
No, I get it. I just don't know how much they'll be in the public right of way is what I'm getting at. In our community.
Correct. A lot of towns or a lot of dealerships or a lot of applicants now, they are asking towns to install them in the public right of way. So there is a few.
Like a restaurant or a.
Correct, right in front of the restaurants or in the public right of way. So it's coming up, so it's, you will see it probably in the near future.
Attorney Patton, could you clarify something you said? If something is already in the state code and our town code has adopted the state code in its plan, in the ordinance already, it says by reference, we adhere to this and this code, including our state code.
Well, we would just need to make sure that we did in fact adopt that specific state code with regards to solar, electric vehicle charging.
Okay,
whatever.
but for instance, that if it was already.
If we've already
in there-
adopted it, yeah,
Okay,
we wouldn't
all
need
right.
to, but we would need to make sure we had. And I
Okay.
don't know if, based on what I don't think adopted anything with regards to solar. And it may be under the a bigger umbrella that covers the state code on solar. I just don't know.
I understand. I just want to make sure I understood what you were
Yeah.
saying was the process. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, if we've adopted it already and it covers that umbrella covers it, no, we wouldn't have to change town code.
on that. Do you want to work with me and see if there's anything that already applies to what our
Yes,
major
I will
concerns
do
are?
that.
And we'll figure that out. And then talk about it again at the next meeting. Does anybody else have anything to add down there? Quiet zone. So it's under new business, but this is not new business. We've been dealing with this for a while. So section 9-2, parentheses 1, grass weeds in excess of 8 inches. Jack honestly knows about this. We talked about this 6 months ago or however long it was. I can't reference the exact meeting. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to bring up, Jack, in regards to this, but one of our violations is for grass weeds in excess of 8 inches. Nowhere in our town code does it say that your grass cannot exceed 8 inches. There's no specific height or anything that references that. It's just, I don't know why the violation says that. There's nothing to reference it. There's noxious weeds, but it doesn't state a height or anything else. I don't know how you can write that violation. I mean, do you have any opinion for him on that, how he would address
So
that?
let me see if I can pull up the town code to see what does the town code actually say.
It's in the nuisance chapter. I don't remember what chapter it is.
Well, I specifically referenced 9-2-1. I don't know if that's it, but I know there's nothing that I have found in the town code that specifically reference grass or weeds being in excess of 8 inches.
So you said it's 9-2.
Yeah, I have section 9-2, and then in parentheses, it's number 1. I didn't mess that up.
The maintaining, using, placing, developing. So noxious weeds and other rank vegetation is considered a nuisance. So is that the only reference to grass and weeds, lawns, or?
Yeah, to my knowledge, that's
My
it.
knowledge, it's true also.
And then it's like, but he's got a violation that he writes and it says in excess of 8 inches, but nowhere in the town code does it say it's unlawful to have your grass exceed 8 inches.
Has there been any objections to it? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, well,
The
the
issue-
problem is that vacant lots is where this has really come into play. Vacant lots are not cut, and then the grass gets real tall, and the neighbors, now that we're having less and less vacant lots in our town, the people are now on each side are sitting there with grass that's overgrown and nobody's cutting it. I mean, that falls under part of the nuisance, but somewhere there was some documentation of it being over 8 inches, and that's what's referenced in the violation, but I could not find the specific.
I think that's another one of those things that somebody said, this is what it's gonna be.
Well, the only thing that I found when I was looking any of it up is when they start talking about like noxious weeds, is that like if you just Google that, it ends up coming up that it's almost like it's a known fact that if that's the case, they're 8 inches or more. I think it actually states the number of 12 inches, but like that's how they've come up with it. But like our code doesn't reference it. And I don't know, it's.
Where this is also coming into play, we now have the property over on Babcock that's requesting not putting grass in their front yard. I don't know if that's come across.
That's a BZA matter. I mean, we've pretty much put that one to bed, that I'm not like,
I don't want to bring up more things in. I mean, we've talked enough today.
no, that's fine. I think it was the direction of the board at this point. I mean, unless anyone else has anything to say about it, that's one specific matter. Because it's only addressing one specific property in our town, that there should be an ordinance for that. That's specifically.
I mean, under state law, a municipality can adopt an ordinance requiring owners of real property located within the municipality to cut and remove weeds and other rank vegetation growing on the property. The ordinance must specify the following and it lists various things out, including the height at which weeds or rank vegetation becomes a violation of the ordinance, specifying the appropriate heights for various types of weeds and rank vegetation. That's under 36-7-10.1 of the Indiana Code.
The Indiana Code.
Indiana Code.
So with the violation stating 8 inches, do you think that would it be your advice that we need to do
So
something?
we don't have a town code that sets out 8 inches. That's the
Right.
problem.
Right. So like ultimately at this point, that violation is just unwritable until the code could reflect it. In my opinion, if that's how we're both kind of understanding that.
So if you look at the third point on that, it reads in a condition which provides Hertfordshire rats, mice, snakes,
I think
which
we have
use a lot of subjectivity.
I think we have to define what length of grass provides
Refuge for those type of animals.
Right, and if the wish of the board would be to adopt that 8 inches, I think then a ordinance needs to reflect that so that the violation could actually be written. I mean, if that's
Specifically to that.
right. But as of right now, it's almost like we're gonna ask him to do something that really. There's a few things that you can interpret how you want them, but I mean. As a law enforcement officer, when I have to interpret things, those are the ones I'm always in court for. Just saying.
So what you're saying is that in order for this to be a more administrable ordinance, that it needs to have actual specific language adopted to the town of Burns Harbor, correct?
That's how I read it and believe it.
And I would agree with that. If anyone would challenge at this point, well, where does it say in town code 8 inches? We would have nothing to refer to.
Right.
And that's always one of the problem areas. So along with that, if we are going to adopt an ordinance, I know that one of the places that gets this particular discussion, since I've started even observing from those seats or being in these seats, that it gets stuck on is we've got some very large lots in town. Are we going to expect people on a parcel that's acres to mow it? Or are we going to, is that going to apply across the board? And if we say residential neighborhood lots have to be it, but not something that's not specifically in a development yet, then we also get back into this subjectivity. So I think that's something that would also need to be addressed along with this, so that we can just say that this is our ordinance of the town for the properties within our town, whatever it is. I think this has come up probably at least every 2 years since I've lived in Burns Harbor.
I think it's more prominent now than it is before because you had so much open land. Now we're getting down to minimal. I mean, there's still a lot of open land, but we are now getting more to where resident, and then there's a acre between them that is left. And that's what they're concerned with. You know, how do we enforce or can enforce or not enforce them to manage some of that so that they don't have that problem? Now that we have residents next to these properties, and these properties have been sitting now for, so long.
Well, I think that's, it all, I mean, are great points, and I think that's something that we all probably need to just maybe come up with a few ideas and bring it back for the next meeting, just so that we can get something that, I don't wanna put a Band-Aid on it, if we're gonna do it, we just need to do it right the first time and not be swimming pools or whatever. Like, we need to start doing things one time and getting them done. I'd rather talk about it for a few meetings and have something that you're good with and everybody else likes, and we can move forward. So,
That's fine with me.
okay, I just wanted to bring it back up because I know that specifically, I may have said, hey, we have a lot on our plate, we need to put this off for now and work on other stuff, and here we are coming in at the time of the year where you're going to be able to use this. And it's obviously gonna be something that, I mean, potentially you could write warnings for it,
Which normally the warning
But-
takes care of the issue, but again.
but I mean, I wouldn't cite that violation.
But that goes into one of the things on the building report too, or the building commissioner's report on the regular farm. Is a person who mentions that they are grandfathered in as a farm. I guess I would have to ask, how is just having a particular zoning give you the right to not keep it tidy from the public, primary public perspective? Would that tie, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong, somebody else can say it.
I don't know how we can regulate farms. I don't know.
Well, it's, again, this is a property that there's been complaints written up on it. And it's got weeds and it's got debris all over the place, and it's been multiple times that this has gone on for over 10 years.
30 years.
Thank you. I haven't researched that, but these are all things that are starting to come into the building department that I'm addressing. And I just need direction on how can I address this stuff, because there's nothing that says specifically, okay, this is, he keeps saying he's a farmland. When you go up, and I actually pulled up the, Sarah helped me with this, I actually pulled it up on the website where it initiates, or I mean, it was not Sarah, but somebody else on one of the other boards, pulled it up, and it states that the property is registered on the state of Indiana as a farmland, but that doesn't grant him into, again, like Sarah just said, allowing him to have the front part of the yard that faces this main street of Babcock. Deplorable. It still needs to be upkept and cleaned, and he's got a building that's falling down, so that's the concern. How do I address this? And I've asked the board, and the board's been researching it, and then they tell me to go back and look up the minutes and see what's been. I'm asking for help, what I'm asking for.
So if a farm property is also used for residential use, can we still like apply our residential code to it? I mean, if we have a town ordinance that says, hey, I mean,
The town ordinance.
I'm not gonna say 8 inches of grass, but,
The town ordinance doesn't address just residential. The town ordinance addresses the town.
Yeah.
right, but
So is it,
the property is within town, so.
what I heard Jack saying, maybe an unsafe building issue, you may have, you know.
There's multiple things on this property, but the number one concern right now is that there's overgrown weeds and there's logs that have been cut down and it's sitting on this property, visible from Babcock, that people are driving by and complaining that, why do I have to keep my residence up when this guy doesn't have to keep the front of his residence up?
Right.
And I'm trying to address this, and I'm every time I go on the property, I'm told, I'm sorry, but I'm a farmland, I've been grandfathered in. And I said, how does that grandfather, that's why I'm asking for direction, I'm trying to say, well, how does that grandfather, there's nothing there, and they said, well, research the minutes and things that went on, and if you can kind of.
I just know I've lived here for 33 years and that property's looked like that since 1989.
Right.
So
And
So not to interrupt, but would it be wrong if I said that it wouldn't be up to us to prove that he was this grandfathered in? It would be up to him to prove this?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know that we would have to prove that he's immune from our laws
exactly, and
or
that's.
our ordinances. So if we wrote the ordinances, it would be up to him to be able to show that, no, I don't have to apply to your ordinances, correct?
I would agree.
So if that's the case, I would write the ordinance. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it, but I mean, ultimately, you're gonna have to talk to whoever you've been talking to, but I mean, I would approach it that way, that it's up to him to be able to show your defense. I mean, it'd be no different than if I stopped the car for a window tint ticket, it's up to them to show that they have a medical exemption for said window tint.
Okay.
I mean, it's not up to me to determine if they have that. I don't have to take them to the eye doctor for it, so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the only workaround right now. That it shouldn't have to be us that does the work to prove that.
Just trying to get direction to where I should go with this, and you're kind of telling me to go ahead and cite.
I'm suggesting that you talk to the powers to be and say what I said and see what they say. Or just
Well enough, thank you.
go to the order in any other business.
I have a question for Shem. Earlier tonight, you mentioned that some communities have with their PUD process, a public administration something for easements.
No, it's subdivision, actually, it's an administrative subdivision process, yeah.
And what is the benefit of that? I realize we don't have it, but what is the benefit to have it?
If there's something minor in the plat that needs to be changed or replaced or edited, it doesn't have to go through a public hearing and subdivide basically. And it can become administratively by the staff could sign off, and the president of the planning commission could sign off based on the staff review. So it's a staff review and the president of the planning commission can sign off on the plat if it's a minor change. And it's a very specific change to the plat itself, so such as easements. I mean, changing an easement, that is administrative.
And an administrative subdivision is for a very small number of lots, correct? I mean, you wouldn't be able to do this whole development, all of Trail Creek with, all of these other, numbered lots, up here, but here, my understanding is there was just these 4 lots off Augustus, and so something of that nature would be more appropriate. That could be an administrative subdivision, so I don't want to suggest that you can just have.
A subdivision that is actually
Right.
administratively, no.
Yeah, no, I understand, I just meant what you mentioned it, that it would have been something that sometimes other communities have
Correct,
that would have addressed this,
yes.
and you said we don't have it, I'm just curious what the advantage of it is.
Less headed to the applicant, less
Fewer
less
public
process.
hearings as well.
Right, because it's very administrative in its nature, so changing a public easement that doesn't have any public utilities on it, it really doesn't need to be a public hearing because there's nothing in it. So it could be beneficial, I guess, to the applicant.
All right, thank you.
How would that change if it was in a PUD though? Because a PUD is an ordinance and we'd be modifying that still. In this
Well,
instance,
you couldn't have changed this from a PUD to an administrative at the beginning of the process. The developer could have developed it as an administrative subdivision.
Okay.
It's not, you can't switch horses midstream, so to speak.
And in this case, this particular PUD started long before these 6 lots were.
So normally the administrative process does not include or involve any public right of way dedication or any main utilities that the town will own. For example, this one, the town doesn't own any utilities on it.
So but there's a road through it, so
Correct.
a public road.
through what?
No,
Discuss
that's a private.
That's a private drive.
Oh, it is private?
Yeah.
I think they're pointing to the top one,
Oh,
the top portion. The rest of it
it's
is
public until the south border of Block 24.
Correct.
So does that mean, and I think we may have talked about this when Mr. Anderson was here last summer, so south of that line, is that portion of Gustafson going to be maintained by the town, plowed by the town? And do they know that?
They do know that.
Okay.
Because even their garbage has to be brought out all the way up to Gustafson.
I think it's in the ordinance as well.
Okay,
You know, we've asked Rob to, as they plow, obviously don't plow a big pile right at the entrance that they have to clear. They try to go to the sides, but yeah, once they get to the south boundary of lot 24, they're on their own. That's
Okay.
I think that's been a point of confusion for a lot of the issues that have happened there, is that south of lot 24 is whatever Mr. Clay wanted it to be, and they bought it.
And
between
I
them and
just
Mr.
like to see-
Not even have Mr. Clay anymore. Pat's gone.
Yeah, I
He
just
sold it. It's,
and he sold it with those easements and with those conditions, and if they didn't read the fine print, that's on them. But it's on them, but it's going to be on us too, with future complaints at this body and town council meetings.
because inevitably 10 years from now, whoever buys lot 4 is gonna complain that the road isn't getting done.
No, that's a maintain.
Lot 4 is sold.
That's
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
But then-
10 years from now, he sells it.
But when he sells
That's
it,
your person.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. The next owner comes in and wonders what's going on.
Yeah,
Or
it's not your
it's-
current owners. it's
Yeah,
the
it's
next
or
owner.
or
Yeah.
20 years from now, when that little section needs to be repaved, or there's potholes on it, or whatever.
It's on them.
There's an ordinance actually as part of the subdivision.
Yeah.
That they have to maintain that roadway to the standard.
Yeah, they have to maintain it to town standards.
But if they don't, who's gonna enforce it? Because the only one driving on it are them and their guests, delivery people.
And the emergency vehicles.
That ends up being something like Tiger.
That's why PUDs are a different animal.
Yeah.
All right, on that note, the only other thing I have to add is that, obviously he's not here, but I'd like to thank Attorney Brazil for all the time and effort he did put forth on this board. He was here for a while, and I'd like to very much welcome Attorney Patton.
We just swear to.
You just have to swear at.
Okay.
Actually, I did have one other question. It got brought up to me by our clerk treasurer that she questioned our ability to be able to waive the fee for a public hearing. Do we have that ability? Is it something we can check into?
Waive the fee for a public, or you mean waive the application fee?
Yeah,
I don't think that you do.
okay.
I mean, I had to look at
I-
the code, but.
I think we just need clarification because it like, I believe it's happened a few times since I've been on this board. And I just need clarification in the future so that we either do or don't need that anymore.
For what type of application, for a PUD or for?
For, let's say, this specific application, the modification of a PUD, we had a couple other. So there was a question too with the town, because I brought that back up, was that, well, technically that came before this board for the town's development across the street. That they came to us and I understand it's the town, but they came to us and asked us to waive the fee. How can they do that if we don't have the authority to waive such fee? You would think it would just have to be something that's done at the town council meeting.
I know with regards to like filing fees, for example, when the town has asked me to pursue collections for ambulance matters, and I go to the clerk's office to file against, John Smith at 123 Main Street. Under state statute, we don't have to pay the filing fee with court because it's viewed as one government paying the fee to another government. Now, on the back end, if we collect money from John Smith, that we have to take those funds and pay the county for that. But, and I just liken it to that in this instance, it's basically you're taking the money from one town account to another town account to pay for
Right.
something. And so I think that's,
Which is probably where Jane's concern comes in.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would just need clarification on that, just so that I know that. I mean, because I think the matter prior to this was that potentially maybe some bad advice was given to somebody, so in order to be able to
Offset the impact.
try and offset the inconvenience, like I think that fee was recommended to be waived and I'm pretty sure it was, but. I just want to make sure that we're doing the right thing moving forward.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it. I mean, I'd have to look at town code, but anything that would allow this body to waive a fee. And I guess it's not like it's a regular occurrence for the town RDC or council to come before this board for something. And we can address that if that happens in the future, but if there's a concern of the clerk treasurer, maybe we just have whatever the cost is, instead of, I don't know, she'd be writing the check and deposit the check and everything else from one account to the other, to just move the money somehow. So everyone is where they should be when it comes to money.
Okay.
Budgets.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Motion in a second. Roll call.
Travis Dunlap,
Yes.
Nicole Migalorni,
Yes.
Nick Loving,
Yes.
Sarah Alvin,
Yes.
Jeremy McCarg,
Yes.